Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy English Spark, your home for boosting English listening and speaking skills. Today, we'll take you through a simple 10-chapter story. Chapter 1 brings a spark in the gallery. Chapter 2 introduces a childhood friend in Enter Riley. Then we follow subtle shifts, Riley's helpful words, a secret rendezvous, the confrontation at the studio, fractured trust, the revealing whisper, the heartfelt plea, and finally, lessons in loyalty. As we journey through each chapter, you'll pick up new vocabulary, natural expressions, and perfect phrases to practice out loud. Let's get started and light up your English journey. Chapter 1. A Spark in the Gallery. I can still feel the soft hush that draped itself over the gallery the afternoon I wandered in, looking for nothing in particular and somehow finding everything. Sunlight flooded through the skylights in luminous sheets, falling across polished wooden floors and scattering in quiet pools beneath the frames. The scent of varnish and fresh coffee from a corner pop-up stand mingled with the faintest trace of turpentine left on well-loved brushes. It reminded me of late nights in my own cramped studio, when the city settled down and all you could hear was the scratch of a stylus across glass and the faraway hum of traffic. At first I drifted past the larger canvases, letting color wash over me the way waves crest and slip back into the sea, until an explosion of crimson and violet pinned me in place. A single painting, no more than 3 feet across, seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Rooftops leaned toward one another like old friends trading secrets, orange clay tiles catching the final sparks of sunset. An indigo sky bled into shades of rose, and tiny silhouettes of chimney pots stood guard like loyal sentinels savoring the last warmth of day. It was a small scene, yet the longer I stared, the more I felt the gravity of entire years compressed inside each brushstroke. I lifted my hand, almost without noticing, hovering a breath away from the canvas. I could swear I felt heat rolling off it, the echo of summer bricks at dusk. Behind me, someone cleared her throat, soft, polite, as though she did not wish to break the spell. I turned and nearly collided with a young woman in overalls dusted with faint smudges of emerald and ochre, a tiny charcoal pencil tucked behind one ear. She had gentle freckles that looked as if they, too, had been painted on by a careful hand, and eyes the cool gray of winter rain. I hope I'm not blocking your view," I stammered, lowering my arm. She smiled, quick and bright. "I was actually watching you watch the painting," she said. "You were leaning in like you could hear it talk." I laughed, half embarrassed, half delighted. "Maybe I could, It's extraordinary. Do you know the artist? Her smile broadened. There was pride in it, but also humility, as though she still couldn't quite believe her own luck. Harper. That would be me. Something in my chest shifted. The gentle click of a puzzle piece finding its home. I introduced myself as Avery, a digital artist who spends too many late nights sketching cityscapes that never stay the same for long. Harper shook my hand, paint-stained fingers rough and warm, and the conversation slipped into an easy rhythm like a familiar melody. She told me how she had climbed dozens of fire escapes to study those very rooftops at sunset, how she liked to watch the day's last light skip across weathered shingles. She spoke of hidden stories tucked between gutters and dormers, a child's lost marble lodged in a crack, a cat curled on a chimney ledge, an old couple's laughter drifting up through an open window. I listened, mesmerized, feeling the gallery. Walls fade until we seem to stand on a roof of our own, wind tugging at our sleeves. We moved together from painting to painting, a bicycle resting against rain-dark brick, a lone street lamp reflected in a puddle shaped like a crescent moon, a single red mitten abandoned on subway steps. With every piece, Harper revealed another fragment of the city I thought I already knew, and through her words it grew stranger and more beautiful than before. She confessed that she painted to freeze fleeting seconds, moments that otherwise vanish so quietly no one notices until they are gone. I found myself opening up in turn, confessing how I sketch endless thumbnails on my tablet because I am terrified of losing ideas before they grow old enough to stand on their own. Harper listened, head tilted, eyes narrow with curiosity rather than judgment. She asked if I ever printed my digital work, suggested layering it beneath translucent acrylic to make the pixels breathe. It was as if she had reached straight into my notebook and scattered sparks over every half-finished dream. Hours must have slipped by. The hush of the gallery brushed against our voices, yet we never felt compelled to whisper. At one point, a curator ambled past, nodding in approval at Harper's painting and offering us each a tiny paper cup of citrus-infused water, as though the room itself wanted to keep us hydrated for the long conversation ahead. When we finally circled back to the beginning, standing once more before the glowing rooftops, an amber warmth pooled behind the glass skylights. Outside, evening had already begun its slow descent. Harper folded her arms and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, part curiosity, part challenge. "There's a cafe 2 streets over," she said after a moment. "They tack local sketches on the walls, change them out every week, The owner lets people trade drawings for coffee if she likes them. I'm dropping off a new piece later. Would you? She hesitated, brushing her wrist against her sleeve, leaving a faint streak of dried vermilion. Would you like to come? I felt an electric thrill pulse through my ribs, equal parts possibility and promise. Only if you let me treat you to their best pastry, I replied. And only if you promise to show me how you caught that shade of violet. I've never been able to get digital pigments to glow like that. Harper's laugh rang through the corridor, bright enough to bounce off every canvas and echo back to us. Deal, she said, extending her paint-flecked pinky finger like a solemn oath. We sealed the bargain with a mock-serious pinky shake. Then we stepped out into the cool hush of early evening, leaving the gallery lights flickering behind us like friendly lanterns. The day might have been ending for everyone else, but for us, it felt as though something rare and incandescent had only just begun. Chapter 2. Enter Riley, the childhood companion. I've known Riley for as long as I can remember, long before I could tell a flat brush from a filbert, long before Harper's sunset rooftops stopped me in my tracks. Riley and I grew up on the same oak-lined street, two restless kids racing bikes down cracked sidewalks, swapping comic books, and sneaking into the old water tower to carve our initials on the rusted railing. If childhood were a mural, Riley's laughter would be the bold streak of saffron running straight through the center of mine. So when I texted Riley the night I met Harper, thumbs flying with the thrill of discovery, it felt only natural to invite my oldest friend into this bright new corner of my life. Riley answered within seconds, peppering me with exclamation points. A painter? A real gallery? And then the inevitable wink. Tell her I'll bring my camera. Every masterpiece needs a photographer, right? 3 days later, early Saturday, the three of us converged at Laughing Bean Cafe, the place Harper loved for its sketch-covered walls and cinnamon-dusted lattes. I arrived first, organizing my tablet sketches on the table so I wouldn't fidget. Harper breezed in next, denim overalls splattered with fresh cerulean, greeting me with that quick, illuminating smile. Moments later, the door chimed again, and Riley strode in, camera slung across one shoulder, sunglasses perched in a nest of wind-tossed curls. Riley Quinn, I said, standing. Prepare to meet the woman who paints light. And you must be Avery's legendary partner in crime, Harper replied, wiping a dab of paint from her cheek before extending her hand. Riley took it in a friendly shake, but there was a glint in those green eyes, an almost imperceptible flicker that I couldn't quite read. Avery tells me your canvases glow, Riley said, voice smooth, almost playful. I'm here to find out if that's an exaggeration. Harper laughed, unfazed. Stick around till dusk. The rooftops do most of the work. We commandeered a corner bench beneath a cluster of graphite portraits. Conversation flowed like fresh ink. Harper spoke of color temperature and rooftop memories. Riley countered with stories from behind the lens. Street festivals caught in mid-roar, a Paris rooftop shot at dawn that sold to a travel magazine. My own anecdotes tumbled out between theirs, enthusiastic, if a little breathless. It felt like the perfect creative triad: painted light, captured light, and digital light. After an hour, Harper excused herself to pick up our drinks. The moment she turned, Riley leaned in, elbow brushing mine. She's charming, Riley said, voice pitched, low, almost conspiratorial. But you forgot to mention she's out of your league. A teasing grin accompanied the words, yet the edge sliced deeper than Riley probably meant. I laughed it off. I always laughed off Riley's jabs, but the remark lodged in a quiet corner of my mind. Harper returned balancing 3 mugs. As she set one before me, Riley snapped a candid photo, mug midair, steam curling like a question mark. Perfect, Riley murmured, reviewing the screen. Harper blushed, and I watched something pass between them, quick as a shutter click. Not flirtation exactly. More an unspoken camaraderie, as if they were already sharing a secret joke that hadn't included me yet. The afternoon spilled into evening. We strolled to the riverside market, where vendors strung fairy lights between stalls of hand-thrown pottery and dried flower bouquets. Harper lingered at a booth selling vintage record sleeves, tracing the worn edges while Riley angled for shots of neon reflections and rain puddles. I floated between them, equal parts content and strangely detached, like a background character observing the leads. Riley made us stop at a graffiti-splashed underpass, an impromptu photo session. Harper, stand there beneath the teal wing, Riley directed, voice confident. Avery, you're, left of frame. Perfect. I obliged, pressing my back to cold concrete, but Riley barely adjusted the lens toward me. Most of the shutter bursts centered on Harper. Her laugh, her posture, how the spray-painted feathers seemed to sprout from her shoulders. I felt a pang, fleeting, but unmistakable. Later, as dusk swallowed the river in violets and indigos, we perched on a wooden jetty to watch the skyline flicker alive. Harper sat cross-legged between us, sketchbook balanced on her knees, chasing. The final shades before night collapsed them, Riley flipped through the camera roll, every now and then angling the screen for Harper's approval. See this one? The light catches your brush strokes. Look. Harper leaned close, shoulder, brushing Riley's arm. Their heads almost touched. Avery, does this color read more cobalt or ultramarine to you? Harper asked, turning so suddenly her braid swept across my sleeve. I glanced down. Cobalt, definitely. But before I could share my thought, Riley interjected. Probably cobalt. Avery's a bit colorblind at dusk, remember? Riley laughed, casual, as though recalling an inside joke from our childhood. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not because the statement was cruel. I had misnamed shades in low light as a kid, but because it slid so smoothly into the moment, like a tiny needle-stitching doubt. Harper only smiled and returned to shading, but her pencil paused half a heartbeat, and that pause burned brighter than any tease Riley had ever thrown my way. Night settled. City lights shimmered across the water. We said our farewells at the station entrance, promising another meetup after Harper's next studio day. Harper hugged me first, soft and sincere, then gave Riley a playful punch on the arm, thanking him for the impromptu photo shoot. Riley's grin was bright enough to rival any lens flare. As I biked home, tires humming on the asphalt, memories of the day braided together, Riley's subtle jabs, Harper's quick laughter, the way the camera lens seemed mostly pointed in one direction. I reminded myself that Riley has always teased, always pushed buttons for sport. But something had shifted. The saffron streak of childhood camaraderie now flashed with a new undertone, an unexpected note of challenge. I tried to shrug it off, focusing instead on Harper's invitation to tour her studio next week. Still, Riley's words replayed in the hum of my wheels. Out of your league, colorblind at dusk. I told myself they were harmless. Yet sometimes, even the gentlest brush can carry a pigment that stains long after the paint dries. Chapter 3. Subtle Shifts. I first noticed the shift on a drizzly Tuesday afternoon, 3 days after our Riverside outing with Riley. Harper and I had planned to meet at her studio, an airy loft above a bakery where the smell of cardamom buns drifted through cracked windows. But when I arrived, her usually open door was half-latched. I knocked, expecting the brisk, "Come in," that always greeted me. Instead, faint footsteps shuffled across the floorboards before the door creaked open just wide enough for one wary gray eye. "Oh, Avery," she said, voice softer than I, remembered. Her hair was twisted into a messy knot streaked with turquoise paint. She looked tired, like someone who had tried to finish a marathon without warm-up stretches. "Sorry. Give me a second to clear some space." Inside, canvases leaned against every wall in tight ranks. But where vibrant color once leapt out, I saw rows of underpainted sketches, rooftops sketched in bruised umber, windows blocked in dull ash. Harper used to layer pigment until every brick glowed. Now half-finished strokes dried in mottled patches. She cleared a stool for me, wiping it with the hem of her flannel. I perched, tablet tucked under my arm, waiting for her usual tumble of excited explanations about what she was working on. None came. She fussed with a jar of cloudy water, clinking brushes against its rim as though noise alone could fill the silence. When I finally asked how the new series was going, she lifted a shoulder. "It's fine. Early stages." Her words felt rehearsed, trimmed of every flourish that once lit them up. I tried to bridge the gap by showing her a digital sketch I had finished that morning, an alleyway lit by neon, lines pulsing with magenta glow. Harper glanced at my screen, managed a quick, "Oh, that's nice" smile, then set her gaze back on a blank canvas as though it had grown teeth. I told myself everyone has off days, yet a singular doubt planted itself, like a seed in the mind's dark soil, and I could not shake the sense that something more than fatigue held her spirit back. That evening, as rain slicked the streets, I messaged Riley. "Harper seemed distant today. You noticed anything?" A typing bubble blinked, disappeared, blinked again before Riley finally answered. "Artists get moody, Ave. She'll bounce back. Maybe don't smother her with check-ins?" The suggestion came wrapped in 3 casual emojis, but the final line stung. Was I smothering? It hadn't felt that way when she used to text me sunrise photos just to ask which cloud looked like a dragon. I forced a laugh at my own insecurity and replied with a thumbs up. Still, I stared at Riley's words until the screen dimmed, wondering why a friend's advice could feel so much like a warning. Over the next week, tiny imperfections in the fabric of my friendship with Harper began to unravel into threads I could no longer ignore. Thursday, Cafe Terrace. We sat beneath a striped awning, drizzle dotting the pavement. Harper's sketchbook lay open beside her latte, but she tapped aimlessly on her phone. Whenever I launched into a story about a glitch in my art software, a strange dream, a new brush pack, her eyes flicked to the screen in her hand. She still responded, yet every sentence arrived a second late, as if translated from a language she no longer spoke fluently. When I teased her Earth to Harper? She blinked as though waking from underwater sleep and apologized, blaming deadline stress. Friday, group chat. Riley dropped a series of black and white portraits he'd shot of Harper under that graffiti wing. They were gorgeous, soft grain, halo flare around her hair, but my name was nowhere in the credits. Someone commented, "Who's your stunning model?" And Riley quipped back, "Just a friend who actually stays still." I hovered over the keyboard, debating a witty reply, but every draft sounded defensive or petty. I let the thread scroll. On without me. Saturday morning, bakery loft. I stopped by with fresh blueberry scones, hoping sugar would sweeten her mood. Through the window, I saw Harper on the phone, shoulders hunched, voice low. Before I could knock, Riley appeared behind her, handing over a paper-wrapped parcel. Photo proofs? A surprise coffee? I couldn't tell. Harper's anxious posture softened at his presence, and she flicked him a grateful half-smile. I stepped back, my reflection in the glass blending with theirs, two parts of a painting that didn't leave space for me. That night, insomnia kept me company. I scrolled my message history with Harper, seeing blue and gray bubbles shrink from paragraphs to lines to single-word responses. When had her exclamation marks vanished? Where was the string of paintbrush emojis she loved? I typed, "Miss talking. Like we used to. Everything okay?" And hovered over send. Riley's caution, "Don't smother her," floated across my thoughts like a no trespassing sign. I deleted the text. Sunday skyline walk. Harper and I used to climb the East District, parking garage at golden hour, capturing the city from 8 floors up. I suggested we go, careful to sound casual. She agreed, but when the day arrived, she messaged, "Actually, Riley's showing me photo refs for texture study. Rain check?" My polite, "Sure, another time?" masked a bruise blooming under my ribs. I went alone, recorded the sunset in heavy, silent sketches where every color felt a shade too cool. There were larger moments, too, subtle only at first glance, seismic if you listened to their aftershocks. At a friend's rooftop party, someone spun a record of jazz-laced indie pop. Harper's head lifted, a smile tugging at her lips. She had once told me that song got her through art school finals. I nudged her shoulder, ready to share the memory, but Riley swooped in, handing her a drink already garnished with the citrus peel she preferred. He nodded toward the music and said, "Thought this tune might brighten your night." Harper's smile lit fully, and they clinked glasses while I lingered a step behind, Applause no one noticed. Later, as fairy lights shivered over the crowd, I overheard Riley telling a small circle, "Avery's brilliant at concept sketches, just sometimes forgets the final polish." Everyone laughed. Even Harper's lips twitched. I forced a grin, but inside it felt as if someone had taken a fine liner to my self-esteem and drawn a trembling crack right down the center. One evening I finally confessed my unease, though not to Riley, not to Harper, but to the blank page of my digital journal. It's like watching color drain from a painting you love while someone else mixes new hues behind your back, I wrote. I'm scared the original will fade beyond recognition, and I don't know how to hold on without pressing my fingers through wet paint. I saved the entry, slammed the tablet shut, and stared at the ceiling until dawn replaced night's questions with a paler, but no less merciless, light. Yet even in the quicksand of doubt, small anchors surfaced, a voicemail from Harper at 2 a.m. It started with a hesitant sigh and ended seconds later in silence. No words, only the sound of her turning pages before she hung up. A crumpled note left in my bike basket outside the gallery. Your neon sketch still glows in my head, H. A photo Riley posted of Harper painting rooftops under his portable flood lamp. In the far corner of the frame, my unfinished digital alleyway glowed on a printout taped to her easel. Each fragment felt like proof that the world I feared losing was not yet gone, just frayed, tugged by unseen hands. The true pivot arrived on a Wednesday that smelled of impending storm. I was packing up my freelance files in the co-working loft when Harper texted, "At your studio?" "Yeah, wrapping up. You okay?" "Can I swing by? Need honest eyes?" My pulse kicked. I replied, of course, cleared the clutter from my drafting table, and waited while thunder grumbled deeper across the skyline. She arrived wrapped in a navy raincoat, hair damp and curling around her cheeks. Under one arm she carried a single canvas, face turned away like a shy child. Without preamble, she set it on the easel and stepped back. It was a rooftop scene, but unlike any I'd seen from her before. No sunset blaze, no gentle nostalgia. Instead, the sky churned in charcoal sweeps, and the tiles glistened slick with fresh rain. At the center, a lone figure stood outlined by a street lamp's sickly yellow glow. Hoodie soaked, shoulders hunched, face obscured. Yet the shape was unmistakably me. My throat tightened. "I don't know if it's finished," Harper murmured. "I don't even know what it's trying to say, but it keeps insisting it exists." I stepped closer, tracing how she'd captured my restless posture, the way I bow my head when I'm lost in thought. There was affection in the strokes, but also melancholy, every color tuned half a note lower. "It says you've been watching," I managed, voice rough. She flinched, as if realizing the confession hidden in her paint. For a second, our eyes locked, and I saw something raw flicker. Regret? Fear? But before I could speak further, her phone vibrated. A message banner flashed. "Riley, call me when you leave." She silenced it quickly, yet the glow of his name on her screen felt like a shudder descending. "I should get back," she whispered. "Storm's coming." She offered a small, weary smile and reached for the canvas, but I placed my hand on the frame. "Leave it," I said. "Let it breathe here tonight. You can decide later if it's finished." She hesitated, then nodded. Our fingers brushed as she released the painting. In that fleeting touch, I felt all the distance of the past weeks, stretching like a chasm we hadn't meant to dig. She opened the door, gusts of wind scattering loose sketches across the floor, and slipped into the darkness without another word. I stood alone in the hush that followed, lightning flickering through loft windows, illuminating the painted version of myself, lonely, rain-soaked, waiting for a light that might never arrive. Somewhere beyond the storm, Harper was dialing Riley, or maybe staring at her phone, torn between voices that claimed to know what was best for her, and I realized the shifts were no longer subtle. They were tectonic plates beneath our feet, grinding toward an inevitable quake. Whatever friendship, whatever spark had ignited in that gallery, was now caught between the artist who painted my silhouette and the photographer who captured her smile. The question was no longer whether the landscape was changing. It was whether I could keep my balance as the ground cracked open. Outside, thunder answered with a rolling drumbeat, an omen, or perhaps a dare. Either way, the storm had finally reached the city, and nothing would be the same when morning painted the sky anew. Chapter 4. Riley's Helpful Words. I woke to the ragged echo of thunder still wobbling inside my chest, even though the storm had blown east before dawn. The loft smelled of wet concrete and stale coffee grounds, and Harper's rain-soaked canvas, my rain-soaked silhouette, rested on the easel exactly where she'd left it. I studied the hunched figure beneath the lone street lamp and felt as if I were looking straight into my own uncertainty. The silence was pierced by the trill of my phone. A new message from Riley, bright as neon against the dimness. Riley. Saw. Your stories. Storm looked brutal. You good? I hesitated, thumb hovering. Before I could decide whether to vent or stay silent, another text popped up. Riley. Not to pry, but Harper mentioned she dropped off a piece with you. Proud of her for actually letting someone see half-finished work. You're a calming influence, Ave. Calming influence. I barked a dry laugh. Last night I'd felt anything but calm. Still, the phrase landed like a warm hand on my shoulder. Exactly. The kind of reassurance Riley excelled at dispensing. The breakfast debrief. 2 hours later, we met in person at Pike and Clover, our childhood haunt that smelled of cinnamon toast and floor wax. Riley slid into the booth across from me, camera bag thumping against the vinyl seat. Rough night? He asked, eyes scanning the bruised crescents under mine. I've had better. I traced a finger along the rim of my mug. Harper's tangled up. I'm not sure how to help. Riley folded lanky arms on the table, expression pitched halfway between concern and friendly mischief. Listen, man, you are helping. But sometimes artists need space to crack open their own eggs. You know, if you hover, she'll freeze. Hover. The word stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. Still, I frowned. She asked for honest eyes, not distance. He nodded sagely, as though he alone possessed a barometer for creative tempests. Exactly. She trusts you in small doses. He lifted his cup in mock toast. Moderation in all things, even Avery. I forced a smile, but the jab lodged somewhere tender. Riley switched topics with acrobatic ease, rambling about a freelance shoot he'd landed, urban beekeepers on downtown rooftops. Halfway through his monologue, he paused to fish a memory card from his pocket. Actually, can you peek at these edits? He handed the card to me. Harper's in a couple frames. I want to make sure they do her justice. The request felt generous, proof he valued my eye. I slid the card into my tablet and scrolled. Harper laughing beneath fairy lights. Harper, mid-stroke at her easel. Harper's profile soft against a backdrop of dripping graffiti wings. Each shot was intimate, almost reverent. They're gorgeous, I admitted. Riley grinned. Great, because she worries the brush smudges on her overalls make her look sloppy. I told her real art lovers worship paint stains. He winked. Do me a favor? If she frets, remind her. Helpful words, always helpful, seeds of doubt. That afternoon, Harper texted an apology for leaving abruptly and asked if we could meet Friday to review the canvas again. My heart buoyed until Riley chimed in the group chat minutes later. Riley, Friday's perfect. After Avery's critique, I'll shoot your progress pics. Promise he won't roast you too hard. The emoji softened the tease, but his phrasing set a subtle distinction. My role was the stern critic, his the supportive documentarian. Helpful? Yes, but framing. A gallery walk and a whisper. Friday came. Harper and I spent 3 focused hours in my loft, mixing storm-dark blues into lamplight yellows, until the figure on canvas looked less defeated, more searching. She seemed lighter afterward, almost buoyant, so we decided to celebrate with a quick walk through the monthly open studios across town. The converted warehouse buzzed with chatter. We drifted between metal sculptures, kinetic mobiles, and glitch art projections until Riley's tall silhouette emerged beside us, camera already in hand. Perfect timing, he said, as though arranged by fate. Lens caps clicked, shutter whirred. Stand close. Candid genius at work. Harper laughed, cheeks flushed. I stepped in, but Riley motioned me slightly to the side. Hold that coffee just like that, Ave. Yes. Natural. Click, click, if. Harper's laugh was the melody. His shudder was the steady percussion. Later, while Harper lingered at a ceramic stall, Riley sidled near. She's smiling again, he murmured, eyes following her. Good sign. Keep doing whatever you're doing. Just don't overanalyze every brushstroke, okay? She told me she sometimes feels you dissect instead of appreciate. The floor beneath me tilted a degree. She said that? Hey, artists vent. He raised both palms, a picture of innocent diplomacy. I'm just relaying because I know you care. I'd want someone to clue me in if I was accidentally piling pressure on. He laid a sympathetic hand on my arm, then drifted off to capture Harper admiring a porcelain vase. Helpful words delivered with the surgeon's precision of someone who'd memorized exactly where arteries lay. Late-night edits. That night, back home, I opened my journal app. Is constructive feedback strangling her? Have I mistaken support for scrutiny? I replayed countless conversations, scanning for moments I might have crossed a line, suggesting she darken a cloud here, lighten a sill there. I love talking technique. Maybe she heard only critique. At 1:12 a.m., Riley sent an audio message. 30 seconds of gentle encouragement. Just reminding you you're brilliant, Ave. Don't let self-doubt talk louder than your talent. Harper's lucky to have someone who notices the details. Sleep easy. I stared at the waveform pulsing on the screen, soothed and unsettled at once. Riley's voice was the auditory equivalent of a weighted blanket. Comforting. Heavy. Too heavy? Tiny levers. Over the next week, patterns crystallized. Compliments with caveats. Riley praised my latest neon alleyway print to Harper, then added, "Avery's genius, but he'll tweak forever if you let him." Exclusive insights. He told me Harper feared her new series was derivative, and told Harper I feared my digital work lacked soul. Both partly true, both sharpened by context. Public. Ally Private Advisor. On social media, Riley tagged me visionary, but in private chats suggested I take a step back so Harper could find her own rhythm. Each interaction was a twirl of sugar around a needle. Helpful words, always helpful, delivered with that lopsided grin and self-effacing shrug. Yet the needle pricked. The phone call. One evening I left the loft late, mist clinging to street lamps. My bus stop sat beside a cigarette kiosk plastered with torn posters. As I waited, I heard Riley's voice, muffled but unmistakable around the corner. I shouldn't have listened. I did. He means well, Riley was saying, low and coaxing. But Avery obsesses. I just don't want you dimming your instincts to match his critiques. You paint with your gut, Harp. Don't let him rationalize the magic out of you. A beat of silence. Harper's reply floated out. A whisper. Sometimes I do feel smaller after critiques. Not intentionally, but my heart buckled. I backed away before I heard more. Bus headlights cutting through the haze and saving me from the urge to confront them on the spot. Helpful words. Words planting careful definitions of who I was. Obsessive, rationalizer, magic dimmer. A flicker of resolve. At home I paced, the hum of the refrigerator my only audience. I replayed Riley's earlier compliments. Saw their double faces. Saw how out of your league and colorblind at dusk had felt playful but also directive, painting a portrait of me in Harper's eyes. Earnest yet flawed, attentive yet overbearing. I opened the voice memo Riley had sent days before, listening anew. Even the encouragement felt curated. He'd known I'd archive it, let it soothe me while it served his narrative. I pulled up my text thread with Harper, reread the half-replies. Were they shrinking because my questions cut too deep, or because someone else was already giving her answers before I asked? I drafted a message to Riley. We need to talk. Just us. Deleted it. Then drafted one to Harper. I just want you to feel safe to paint with me or without me. Deleted that too. Finally, I opened a blank canvas on my tablet. If I couldn't speak yet, I'd draw. 2 figures on a chessboard rooftop. One holding a camera that doubled as a night piece, the other clutching a brush like a bishop. Between them, a pawn that looked like me, trapped halfway across the board. I painted until dawn rouged the blinds. The turning point. The next afternoon, Riley pinged our group chat. Riley, Harper's rooftop series almost ready. Who's up for a sunrise shoot? I typed, count me in. But before sending, I stared at the blinking cursor. Sunrise shoots were Riley's territory, a playground for his lens flare and golden halos. I remembered his words by the cigarette kiosk. Don't let him rationalize the magic out. Instead of hitting send, I opened a private chat with Harper. Me. Would love to see the new pieces, just you and me. No feedback unless you ask. Coffee. On me? I waited. 3 pulsing dots appeared, vanished, reappeared like hesitant footsteps. Finally, Harper. I'd like that. Tomorrow afternoon? My studio? A simple plan, but it felt like the first stone placed back onto a cracked path. That evening, I received a final helpful note from Riley. Riley, heard you're meeting Harper solo. Good call. Quiet vibes might ground her. Let me know how it goes. Yeah? Proud of you for dialing back the critique mode. Proud of me. He meant it. I could almost taste the sincerity. But beneath the sweetness, I sensed the lever he'd tucked inside, ready to tilt the balance whichever way served him. Next, I set the phone face down, heart steadying. Riley's words were helpful, yes, but also weighted, steering, shaping. Tomorrow, I'd learn whether Harper could hear my voice beneath that ballast, or whether Riley's careful guidance already rang louder in her ears. Either way, the time for silence had passed, and if Riley's helpful words were the brush he used to paint his version of the truth, I needed to find my own palette. One vivid enough to reclaim the colors he'd quietly siphoned away. Chapter 5. A Secret Rendezvous. I should have known that calm Friday afternoon in Harper's loft was only a lull before a much louder noise. She had shown me 3 new canvases, glossy with half-wet cobalt roofs, and for a brief hour, the Aide studio smelled like possibility again. We planned to meet the following Tuesday to varnish the first layer. Yet by Monday evening, her texts thinned to ellipses, then silence. So, Tuesday, instead of waiting for another rain check, I packed a portfolio of reference photos I'd printed for her. Sky gradients, slate textures, chimney silhouettes, and rode the tram across town. I rehearsed a casual greeting all the way, promising myself I would ask nothing heavy, just hand over the photos, maybe share a croissant, and leave. The bakery downstairs was closed for repairs. Metal shutters rolled down like eyelids, so the stairwell that usually smelled of sugar and yeast felt hollow. I climbed, knuckles ready to rap her door, when I noticed a faint rectangle of painter's tape on the jamb. Back later, working off-site. No timestamp, just those words in Harper's looping script. Off-site. She never left the loft while a layer of oil was drying. She said the paint needed her heartbeat in the room. Confused, I messaged, "Here with your refs, call when free." The screen stayed gray. Thunder growled in the distance, summer's afternoon temper, and I decided to grab coffee at the Riverside Market until she surfaced. The Rooftop Cafe. The market skirts a renovated textile mill, its red brick chimneys stitched with ivy. A triangular iron stair spirals from the second-floor food hall up to a roof deck called the Loom, where mismatched patio chairs circle glass tables recycled from weaving looms. Harper and I had sketched sunsets up there a dozen times. I climbed, craving the breeze. Halfway up I heard laughter, Harper's, not the brittle chuckle of the last few weeks, but the wind chime trill she used when completely at ease. The sound stopped me dead. Then another voice answered, lower, smooth, familiar. Riley. My first impulse was joy. Maybe she'd invited him to brainstorm textures. Then I remembered the hush in her studio, the voicemail of turned pages, the half apologies. An ache of curiosity tugged me upward. I slowed near the top landing, peering through the gaps in the wrought iron railing. 2 tables away, Harper and Riley sat alone beneath a string of unlit Edison bulbs. No sketchbook or camera lay between them, only iced tea sweating in tall glasses. Harper's braid had escaped its tie, curling along her collarbone. Riley reached forward, gently tucking a loose strand behind her ear while saying something I couldn't hear over the hum of traffic below. She laughed again and swatted his hand, but her eyes lingered on him a beat too long for playful scolding. Waitress arrived. Riley paid for both drinks in cash. Riley, who never carried bills, and when the waitress left, he leaned in, elbows on knees, speaking quickly. Harper listened, thumb circling the condensation ring on her glass. I caught fragments on the wind, steal your own joy back. He overthinks every color curve. If a critique makes you hesitate, it isn't love, it's control. Each phrase landed like a pebble against my ribs. Was that how Riley had framed me? A well-meaning tyrant, rationing colors? Harper said something in reply, too soft to catch, but she covered Riley's hand with her own. He turned his palm, lacing their fingers. Lightning flashed beyond the river, illuminating the deck for a split second. In that white flicker, I saw the tableau perfectly. Harper's paint-stained thumb, resting in the valley of Riley's lifeline, his camera bag perched at his feet like an obedient dog. The familiarity of their posture, the repose of two people who had tested this closeness more than once, made the air in my lungs feel counterfeit. I could have stormed over, demanded an explanation. I could have snapped a photo for proof, the way Riley always did. Instead, I stepped back into the stairwell's shadow and let the rain-warm gloom swallow me. Overheard in the dark. Retreating felt cowardly, but something held me. A need to know the whole shape of the knife before it struck. I stood just out of sight, ears straining. Water began to slap the roof panels. Voices lifted to compete with the shower. Riley. When will you tell him? He's a good guy, Harper, but he clings. Harper. I will, I swear. I hate hurting him. Riley. Silence hurts longer. You've outgrown the safety net. Don't let guilt tie the knots tighter. Harper. I don't want him to think I'm choosing sides. Riley softly. You're choosing yourself. That's the only honest choice. Thunder answered like applause. Then silence, thick except for the rain's hiss. I pictured Harper, nodding, and in that imagined motion I felt months of shared sketches, coffees, late-night critiques sliding off a shelf inside me, pages scattering, flight downward. A gush of cold drizzle spilled through the stairwell grate, snapping me from paralysis. I descended quickly, afraid they might choose that moment to leave. Each metal step rang louder than the last, but the storm muffled my escape. At ground level, I ducked through the market's glass doors. Music from a busker's violin flooded the corridor, covering the tremor in my breath. I stood by a stall of stained glass trinkets, hands stuffed in damp pockets, mind racing. Riley's words replayed, "If critique makes you hesitate, it isn't love." Had I been so clinical in my feedback? Or had Riley massaged every suggestion I offered into an accusation? I thumbed open our message thread, scrolling for proof of kindness. Sunset. Emojis, congratulations, silly gifts. But each one now felt flimsy beside the image of their intertwined fingers. I almost typed, "We need to talk." Instead, I watched 3 dots stutter, disappear. Harper texting someone else. Riley, no doubt. When the busker paused, I heard footsteps splash behind me. I turned instinctively, but it was only a courier, dodging puddles. Still, adrenaline rushed my temples. I realized I didn't want to face them yet. I couldn't trust my voice to stake any claim that wouldn't sound like possession. Proof in the camera. Back at the loft, I toweled rain from my hair and, without thinking, clipped Harper's storm canvas back onto the easel. I studied the lonely figure again, noticing details I'd missed. In the reflection of the lamplight, puddle, two silhouettes approached behind the solitary one, blurred shapes converging. Had Harper already painted the story I'd witnessed? I rummaged for my DSLR, dusty, barely used since phone cameras sharpened, but the battery was dead. Anger flared. Riley would never let a battery die. Riley would have documented the moment 3 different ways, stored duplicates in cloud folders, captioned them with wry humor. My own neglect suddenly felt complicit. As I hunted for a charger, a notification blinked across my computer. New post. From R. Riley Quinn photo. My pulse thudded. I clicked. There, fresh as the rain still dripping from my cuffs, was a monochrome shot. Harper leaning on the loom's railing, head tipped back to catch the first drops, eyes closed, smile serene. Below, Riley's caption, "Find someone who feels like sky after a storm." The post already brimmed with heart emojis and comments. Photographer, muse vibes, couple goals. He hadn't tagged Harper by name, nor me at all. A gnawing sense of erasure burned, like being edited out of my own life's frame. The Scarlet Umbrella. It was nearly midnight before the rain sputtered out. Restless, I wandered to the kitchenette for water and spotted something outside the frosted window, a flash of red. Harper's umbrella, propped against the alley dumpster where she sometimes smoked clove cigarettes when a painting frustrated her. Had she come by while I paced inside? Or had Riley dropped it off after the cafe? I slipped downstairs. The umbrella was slick but intact, patterned with scarlet poppies. A birthday gift from me months ago. Taped to the handle was a small note in Riley's handwriting. Left this behind. Thought you might need it tomorrow. No greeting, no signature. Just a quiet deed announcing who remembered her forgetfulness. I held the umbrella a long time, fighting the childish urge to hurl it into the dumpster. Instead, I opened it under the dim alley lamp. Rainwater sheeted off, catching the light like broken glass. Inside, I noticed a faint paint thumbprint near one rib. Cobalt, my favorite shade. the one she'd mixed in our session. Proof, at least, that something of us still clung to what Arthur Miller once called the things we leave behind. But another truth hovered darker. Riley knew the places she'd lose things. He retrieved them before she realized they were missing. He was already writing the story of what Harper needed and who could provide it. A quiet resolve. Upstairs, I dried the umbrella, set it by the studio door, and opened a new canvas in Procreate. Lines spilled fast. No rooftops, no neon alleys, only two overlapping circles. One silver, one vermilion. In the center where they met, I etched a barely visible third shade. Bruised purple, the color of a sky that cannot decide between night and dawn. Beneath, I lettered a single phrase. Shared light isn't stolen, but shadows grow where secrets live. Somewhere in the city, Harper was reading Riley's captions, maybe smiling. Maybe she would text me tomorrow to thank me for the reference photos I never delivered. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, the rendezvous was no longer secret to me, even if they believed it was. My chest still ached, but a sharper clarity crystallized behind the pain. I would not let someone else dictate the entire palette of this story. If Riley painted me as critic and Harper as frail, I would paint myself back in. Flaws, doubts, devotion, all of it. Art, after all, is revision. And tomorrow, when Harper opened her loft door, she would either invite me in as collaborator again or close it for good. Lightning flickered one last time on the horizon, silent now, just a strobe in a distant cloud. I whispered to the empty room, as though the storm could still hear. The sky after the storm is only beautiful if everyone sees the same morning. Then I powered down the lights, leaving Harper's painting glowing faintly on the easel, a witness to the night's revelations, and waited for dawn to write its next line. Chapter 6. Confrontation at the Studio. I spent the night pacing the loft in circles so tight they could have left grooves in the floorboards. By dawn, fatigue made the city outside my windows look like an overexposed negative, light where shadow should be. Whole buildings washed to paper white. Yet a single thought burned with impossible clarity. This couldn't be dragged out any longer. Half-truths fester. Silence sculpts its own narrative. Today I would face both of them. No scripts, no mediators, just the raw syntax of whatever. Words we could still trust. The approach. Harper's studio occupies the top floor of an old glove factory, brick battered by a century of winters. I arrived at 10:30, heart battering my ribs, umbrella gift in hand. Her door stood ajar, faint music spilling into the stairwell, Billie Holiday crooning through dusty speakers. I knocked once, twice. Avery? Her voice floated out, cautious, but not cold. I stepped inside. Morning light spilled through the skylight in diagonal bars that cleaved the room into gold and shadow. Half-finished canvases leaned everywhere, but the rooftops were gone. In their place rose a forest of lonely lampposts, each casting elongated silhouettes of solitary figures. My chest tightened at the familiarity of every bowed head. Harper stood near the easel in denim overalls, knuckles streaked with dried lavender paint. She looked exhausted, eyes ringed with sleepless charcoal, yet her posture straightened when she saw the umbrella. "You left this in the alley," I said quietly, setting it by the coat rack. "Riley dropped it off," she murmured. I nodded, not trusting my voice to keep the tremor hidden. A canvas between us. Without invitation, I crossed to the center of the room where last night's canvas, my rain-soaked silhouette, still clamped to the easel. Harper had added details. The distant glow of two approaching figures sharper now, almost recognizable if you squinted. The paint around them was still wet, shining like fresh bruises. "You came back to it," I whispered. She wiped her hands on a rag, avoiding my eyes. "Couldn't sleep." I swallowed. "Harper, we need to talk about yesterday." The words landed like a dropped pallet, color everywhere, impossible to ignore. Her shoulders tensed. "About what, exactly?" "About what Riley told you, about what I overheard on the loom." At that, her gaze snapped up, startled. Silence throbbed between us, thick with turpentine. "I wasn't spying," I hurried on, "but I heard enough to realize you're hurting, and that I might be part of the hurt." She pressed paint-grimed fingers to her temples. "Avery, I never meant—" "Did I make you feel small?" My voice cracked. "I need to know the truth from you, not relayed through anyone else." Harper exhaled a shaky breath. "You never meant to. But sometimes your critiques come so fast. Color balance, perspective, texture, that I stop seeing the painting and start seeing potential mistakes." She twisted the rag in her hands. "Riley says that if feedback makes me hesitate, maybe it's not love." I felt the sting, but forced myself to listen. "Do you believe that?" "I don't know." She paced to the window, rain-smudged light haloing her braid. "You and I always talked shop. That's how we met. But lately it feels like you're dissecting my work before it can breathe." A shard of memory surfaced. me nudging her skyline, gray half a shade darker, suggesting she glaze over an entire rooftop because the value range was too narrow. I heard my own voice, gentle yet relentless, and understood how easily devotion can masquerade as control. "Then I'm sorry," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted to edit the magic out of your brush. I only wanted to stand close enough to witness it." Tears glimmered in her eyes but didn't fall. Her lips parted, like she might accept the apology. Then footsteps clanged on the metal stairs. Riley. Triangle in oil and steel. He appeared in the doorway carrying a paper bag and 2 coffees. His smile faltered when he saw me. "Morning, artists." He lifted the bag. "Fuel, blueberry streusel for the hard-working genius." He set a cup near Harper, the other near a stool an arm's length from her side. No third cup waited for me. Tension electrified the air like the charge before lightning. Riley registered it, glanced at Harper, then back to me. "Everything okay?" "I was just apologizing," I said, forcing steadiness, "and asking Harper to tell me directly how my feedback affects her." Riley's brow furrowed in faux concern. "See? Communication. Awesome." He clapped lightly, then turned to Harper. "You good?" She nodded, though uncertainty rippled across her face. "We're talking, Riley. It's fine." He stayed, by her elbow anyway, body a subtle barricade. I inhaled, summoned courage sharpened by sleeplessness. "Riley, can we speak honestly? All 3 of us?" "Always," he said, smile taut. "Transparency is key. Then be transparent about this." I met his gaze. "You've been telling Harper I suffocate her process. You've been telling me she needs space from my over-analysis. Those comments aren't neutral. They guide her away from me and toward you." "Why?" A flicker, the briefest glitch, crossed his expression before his features returned to calm. "I'm only protecting Harper's flow. She's blooming." To protect someone, you first convince them they're under threat, I said quietly. "You've painted me as that threat." He laughed, soft, dismissive. "Avery, you're over-interpreting again." Harper's head shifted, confusion darkening her eyes. "Riley, did you really say those things?" He touched her shoulder. "I told him you needed breathing room. That's not betrayal. That's honesty." "But you also said my hesitation means his love is control," she murmured. He opened his hands. "I said critique can feel controlling. If that resonates, maybe there's truth." "She deserved to decide that alone," I pressed, "not via your whispers." Something steely flashed in Riley's gaze. Maybe I'm just not afraid to call things what they are. Or maybe, I countered, you're afraid Harper's art will keep being ours, not just yours. The sentence rang louder than I intended, echoing against bare brick. Harper flinched as though cold air sluiced through the skylight. Riley's jaw clenched. The unraveling. Riley set his coffee down with deliberate care. Avery, you and I have been friends forever, but you've always needed center stage. Harper finally found someone who notices her without turning every brushstroke into a lecture. Maybe step back and accept not everything revolves around your critique. The words sliced close, tempered by decades of shared secrets. I had once admired his candor. Now I saw how easily it skewered. I don't want center stage, I said, throat thick. I want a stage big enough for all of us, where support isn't a tug of war. Harper watched us like a spectator at a tennis match, eyes flicking from one to the other. Her fingers, still stained lavender, pressed to the base of her throat. So, choose, Riley urged her gently, yet the underneath thrummed with urgency. Whose presence helps you breathe? Lightning cracked outside, startling all three of us. Rain hammered the roof. In the sudden roar, Harper stepped back from both of us and faced her canvas. She stared at the three silhouettes, the solitary figure and the approaching pair, then touched the wet paint with a trembling fingertip, smearing their shapes into an indistinct blur. I can't do this, she whispered. Not like it's a competition. She turned, voice breaking. Riley, you've supported me, yes, but lately your words feel angled. She pivoted to me. Avery, your feedback matters, but sometimes I can't hear myself over it. I need to create without either of you narrating the process. Riley's face paled. I never angled anything. She shook her head, tears slipping free. Maybe, not intentionally, but I'm standing in crossfire. She wiped her cheeks with paint-smeared hands, leaving purple tracks. I need silence. My own silence. The fallout. Thunder rolled again. None of us spoke. Finally, Harper walked to a supply shelf, pulled out a fresh blank canvas, and propped it on an easel facing the opposite wall, away from both our gazes. I'm starting something new, she said. No rooftops, no lamplight, no shadows you recognize. I don't know what it is yet, but until I figure it out, I need space. She faced us. Please leave. Her request held no malice, only exhaustion. Pain throbbed in my sternum, but I nodded. Riley looked struck, as though the studio lights had flicked off mid-film. He opened his mouth, closed it, gathered the untouched pastry and both coffees. Without another word, he exited, footfalls rattling the staircase. I lingered a heartbeat longer, scanning the room that had once felt like shared territory. The umbrella stood by the door. I left it. Harper's gaze remained on the blank canvas, brush poised like a compass needle pointing away from us. "I believe in whatever you paint," I said softly. She didn't look up, but her shoulders eased. The slightest degree. I stepped into the hallway, shutting the door behind me with careful finality. The staircase smelled of rain-soaked rust. Halfway down, I heard the soft click of the lock sliding home. Aftermath in silver and teal. Outside, water pooled on the cobblestones, reflecting a fractured sky. Riley leaned against a downspout, pastry bag clenched in his fist, coffee cups steaming between us like twin engines. "This isn't over," he muttered, voice tight. "I know," I said. It wasn't threat or promise, just truth. We both loved the same brilliance inside Harper, but love isn't ownership. We parted without another word. As I walked, drizzle cooled the heat in my face. For the first time in weeks, no phone buzzed. With helpful advice, no critique itched at my tongue. The silence Harper craved began to settle around me too, heavy, awkward, oddly liberating. I didn't know if she would paint me back into her new work, or if Riley's lens would still frame her dawns. But somewhere inside that studio, a blank canvas waited for her alone, and maybe that empty space, unclaimed by any voice, was the only honest beginning left. I lifted my eyes to the bruised sky, inhaled petrichor, and felt something crack open. Not defeat, not triumph, but the first breath after surfacing from a long dive. Rain ran in silver lines down my cheeks, indistinguishable from tears, and I let it wash the palette clean. Chapter 7. Fractured Trust. The first week after the studio showdown felt like living inside a room where someone had smashed the only mirror. Every surface still familiar, yet nothing quite reflected back the way it used to. I walked through, my routines with phantom weight on my shoulders, as if Harper's silent request for distance had manifested into a physical rucksack I could neither remove nor fully grasp. I tried to draw, opened Procreate, pulled up the blank canvas, but every stroke stalled halfway, hovering like a skipped heartbeat. Neon alleys I once loved now looked forced. Rooftops reminded me of Harper's. Even abstract shapes unfurled into outlines that resembled two figures, camera and brush in hand, orbiting a third left in the dark. So I switched to mundane tasks. I alphabetized my art bookshelf, swept the loft twice a day, updated old software, plugins, and even scrubbed the streaky window panes that stare down at the river. None of it hushed the static in my head. Riley, of course, was everywhere, even when he wasn't. My phone kept lighting up with his latest gallery of pocket portraits. A saxophonist silhouetted against streetlights, a child chasing soap bubbles, a lone painter perched on a rooftop at dawn. Harper appeared in several shots, rarely a full face, always an evocative fragment, her hand flicking ultramarine across canvas, the back of her neck lit by sunrise, her boots speckled with paint flecks. His captions read like casual poetry. Some sparks prefer sunrise silence. Let the muse breathe and the picture breathes back. I double-tapped to send a perfunctory heart exactly once, then muted his feed. It felt petty, jealous even, but the alternative was reopening a bruise every few hours. Eli, the ceramicist who sublets the corner studio across from Harper, texted, "Midweek Eli. Saw Harper sketching lampposts again. She looks drained. You two okay?" I hovered over the keyboard, unsure how much to reveal. In the end, I typed, "Me," working through creative knots, giving her space. His single thumbs up stung with its simplicity. How do you summarize betrayal, apology, and silence into a blue bubble? You don't. You let people fill gaps with their own assumptions. Sleep became a fragile treaty. Some nights I lay awake replaying the confrontation, thinking of words I should have used, calmer words, sharper words, anything to keep Harper from painting us both out of her life. Other nights exhaustion dragged me under like an undertow, only for dreams to stage reruns. Riley leading Harper through halls of glowing canvases, while I hammered on glass walls unable to reach them. Morning after morning I woke to the hollow click of no notifications from Harper. By Thursday I resolved to apologize again, briefly, respectfully. I penned half a dozen drafts. Hope the new canvas is treating you kindly. I still believe in your colors. Miss sharing coffee and sky gradients. No agenda. Just that. If silence is helping, keep it. But if you need a sounding board, I'm here. I deleted them all, afraid each line might feel like pressure masquerading as care. Friday afternoon, the universe forced my hand. A local art nonprofit called Frantic. Their keynote speaker canceled last minute for Saturday's youth workshop, and my name had surfaced as the digital expression substitute. I almost declined. Stage lights felt unbearable right now, but a voice inside reminded me that purpose outruns paralysis. I said yes, which meant I needed examples, completed pieces, to project for 50 teenagers hungry for stories behind every pixel. I sifted through my portfolio, wincing at how many slides bore Harper's influence. Rooftops co-designed, color palettes refined during late-night critique sessions, video time-lapses where her laughter popped off camera after each milestone. Could I showcase work stitched with someone's absent laughter? I added them anyway, captioning each collaboration clearly. Recognition, not erasure. The workshop day arrived gray and drizzly, as if the sky couldn't commit to anything brighter. I stood backstage clutching a remote, palms damp. When the lights dimmed and my first slide illuminated, an unexpected calm threaded through me. I talked about perspective, about building layers of light, about how feedback, when offered with consent, transforms a sketch into a dialogue. Mid-presentation, a hand rose. A quiet girl in the back row, nails flecked with dried clay. Does sharing your work ever make you feel exposed? She asked. The room hushed. I swallowed. Yes, I said. Because art is a confession without the guarantee of forgiveness. But hiding it costs more. It keeps the confession but steals the chance at understanding. As I spoke, I realized the words weren't for her alone. Afterwards, several students swarmed the stage, asking about brush types, color grading, passion versus paycheck. One lingered, a boy named Jalen, holding a printed photo. It was Harper's storm canvas, snapped from her studio window at some open house months ago. This piece changed how I paint rain, he said. You know the artist, right? Could you sign next to her signature? You both inspire me. I blinked hard. I'm not the painter, I managed. Her name's Harper Lynn. She deserves full credit. He nodded, unfazed. Tell her she turns storms into hope. His sincerity pierced something brittle inside me. Shame, pride, loss coiling together. I promised to pass the compliment. That evening, I drafted an email to Harper, longer than any text, tranquil as a held breath. Today, I met a student moved by your storm canvas. He said you turn storms into hope. I thought you should know people are seeing your light even when you can't see theirs. I also realized feedback is a privilege, not a right. I'm learning to ask before giving, to witness without steering. Trust has seams. It can rip, but maybe it can be mended stitch by stitch if both hands meet in the middle. No response needed. Sending this only so silence doesn't become a wall we never climb. I hovered over send, heartbeat thunder loud, then clicked. The message whisked into cyberspace, destination uncertain. Immediately, I felt both lighter and terrified, like tossing a bottled letter into rough seas. 2 days passed. No reply. Yet something shifted Monday morning. I woke without the habitual dread, made coffee, and sketched an alleyway that, for once, didn't look like sorrow wearing neon. The city outside shimmered after overnight rain. I opened every window, letting petrichor and traffic noise fill the loft. The afternoon brought a soft knock. I opened the door to find a small parcel on the mat. No sender listed. Inside lay a single Polaroid, my silhouette under lamplight from Harper's canvas, now trimmed into a loose hexagon. On its back, she'd written 8 words. Storms teach foundations. Let's rebuild with quieter colors. No signature, but none was needed. Beneath the Polaroid nested a paint-smeared envelope. I unfolded the note inside. Thank you for the student's message. I'm not ready to talk critiques, but I'd like to walk the river path this Sunday. No cameras, no sketchbooks, just conversation. Noon? Relief crashed through me so fiercely my knees wobbled. It wasn't restoration, not yet. But it was a plank across a fracture. An invitation to step out over the fault line. I texted back one word, absolutely, then set the Polaroid on my desk where morning light could find it. Trust was fractured. Yes, cracked down the center like glass under pressure. But cracks can channel light in ways perfect panes never could. Sunday we would see whether that light was enough to guide 2 artists back to common ground, away from the lens of a friend, whose helpful words had blurred the focus. For the first time in weeks, I opened a fresh canvas and laid down color without judgment. Silver where sorrow lived, soft teal where hope edged in, and a quiet strip of white between them. Space left intentionally blank, waiting to be filled with whatever Harper and I discovered on that river walk. I didn't know if the painting would ever feel complete. All I knew was that the brush finally moved, and the silence between strokes sounded less like absence, more like making room for something fragile to grow. Chapter 8. The Revealing Whisper. Sunday arrived dressed in the pale gold of early autumn, the kind of soft weather day that pretends nothing painful has ever happened. I left the loft at 11, pockets empty on purpose, no sketch pen, no lens, wipes, no digital stylus that might tempt me into critique mode. Crossing the pedestrian bridge toward the river path, I tried to rehearse casual hellos, but every draft felt either too brittle or too tender. so I let the steady thrum of water beneath the pilings quiet my thoughts instead. Harper was already waiting at the trailhead, leaning against an iron lamppost that matched the ones she'd been painting for weeks. She wore an oversized oatmeal sweater flecked with cobalt, leftover pigment, not dye, and held a thermos with both hands as if anchoring herself to its heat. When she saw me, her shoulders relaxed just enough to look like permission. "Chamomile," she said, offering the thermos, in case conversation gets naughty. I laughed, soft, grateful, and took a sip, the steam threading calm through my chest. We began walking downstream, gravel crunching beneath our shoes, a chorus of geese heckling overhead. For the first half-mile we traded safe topics: the nonprofit workshop, Eli's latest ceramic kiln disaster, a new cafe rumored to serve coffee in hand-thrown cups shaped like paint palettes. Each sentence loosened the week-old tension another millimeter. When the city noises dwindled and only river hush remained, Harper paused at a railing where willow branches skimmed the current. She traced the weathered wood, eyes fixed on the ripples. "That student's message," she said. "The one who loves storm canvas? It stuck." I nodded, watching how sunlight carved silver crescents in her irises. "He called it hope," she continued, voice low. "But I painted it when I felt anything but hopeful. I think that's why it matters. Art lets the wound show light even before it heals." Then the painting was braver than either of us. I managed a wry smile. "I'm trying to catch up." She exhaled, half laugh, half sigh. "Me too." We resumed walking. The path soon bent inland toward an abandoned boathouse, once a bright cafe, now shuttered under peeling teal paint. Ivy clawed the walls. I suggested taking the boardwalk loop back toward the city, but Harper slowed, gaze fixed on the boathouse door hanging crooked on its hinges. Riley and I shot sunrise. "Photos here last month," she murmured almost to herself. It felt cinematic. Empty tables, dust motes, light like stage fog. Her words carried no accusation, yet the memory of those photos pricked. I kept quiet. We stepped onto the deck. The wood groaned but held. Inside, sunbeams slipped through, broken slats, striping overturned chairs. Harper drifted ahead, fingertips brushing dusty tabletops as though reading Braille memories. A sudden voice cut the quiet. "Don't worry, she's nearly there." We froze. The sound floated from the far end of the room, through a half-open supply closet. Harper's eyes widened. She pressed a finger to her lips and edged closer. I followed, heart ricocheting off ribs. Inside the closet, beyond a ragged curtain of plastic tarp, someone spoke hurriedly. The voice was unmistakable. Riley's, muted but clear in the hollow acoustics. "I've told her slowing down is freedom," he said, words clipped like he feared being overheard. "Avery keeps nudging technique. She's already questioning that dynamic. Another nudge, she'll step back herself." A beat of silence, then the fainter crackle of a phone speaker. Somebody replying, though we couldn't catch the words. Riley again. "It's not manipulation, it's perspective. I'm just steering the narrative away from critique fatigue. Trust me, by next gallery cycle, she'll want someone who listens more than lectures, and I'll be right there." Harper's breath hitched. I felt her flinch as if the sentences were arrows aimed through the wall. My pulse roared in my ears. Beside me, she squared her shoulders, lifted her chin, and pushed the tarp aside. I didn't stop her. Riley stood under a dusty skylight, cell phone at his ear, camera bag slung cross-body, a near-empty latte balanced on a crate. His expression flickered from confidence to shock the instant he saw us. "Harp," he stammered, pulling the phone away. "I didn't expect—" Harper's voice emerged steady, colder than river stones. "Steer the narrative? Is that what you've been doing?" Riley swallowed. "You weren't meant to— Look, it's out of context." "Context is everything," I said, words hushed but razor sharp. He bristled. "Fine. I called a curator friend. She asked why your work plateaued. I said critique pressure can suffocate. Vision? I was protecting Harper's reputation. By framing me as the reason she hesitates," I shot back. "By shaping her doubts so you could step in as savior." Riley's jaw clenched. "I only amplified what she already felt." Harper stepped forward, sunlight igniting flecks of paint on her sleeve. "Whether I felt it or not, you voiced it without my consent. You whispered instead of asking me to speak for myself." Riley opened his mouth, closed it, gaze skittering between us. "I'm sorry if it seems—" "It is," Harper cut in. "It is manipulative when you decide the story for me." Tension thickened like wet plaster. Rain clouds crowded the skylight, dimming the room. I took a breath. Memories of childhood bike races and midnight comic swaps spiraling through me. "Riley," I said softer. "You're my oldest friend. But friendship built on unspoken leverage, on whispers, fractures trust. You taught me to frame the world through a lens. You didn't teach me it had to be your lens." He looked stricken, defensive anger draining into something that resembled shame. Words faltered on his lips. Nothing came. Harper spoke again, gentler now. Maybe your intent was kindness, but intent can't erase impact. If I paint slower, it's because I'm sifting my own voice, not because someone edits the chorus. Outside, wind rattled a loose shutter, the only applause this confrontation would get. Riley shifted, shoulders sagging. I never wanted to lose you both. His voice broke on the last word. Silence settled thick as dust. Then Harper inhaled, deliberate. We're not lost. We're pausing. But if you want to stay in this story, it has to be written together. No whispers. Riley nodded, eyes glassy. He tucked the phone into his pocket, removed the camera strap from his neck, and set the device on the crate, as if relinquishing a weapon. I'll step back, he murmured. Listen more, frame less. No theatrical hug followed, no neat resolution. Just 3 breaths echoing in a room of peeling paint and half-spoken grief. Yet in that quiet, I felt a subtle click inside, the first hinge of forgiveness grinding toward possibility. Harper turned to me. Walk back? She asked, voice raw. I nodded. We left the boathouse side by side, Riley lingering behind like a ghost deciding whether to fade or follow. Outside, the river carried on, indifferent to our seismic shift. Wind tugged at Harper's braid. She let it unravel, strands whipping free. As we rejoined the path, she whispered, so soft I almost missed it. Thank you for hearing the whisper I couldn't. It wasn't gratitude alone. It was an invitation to build trust anew. Volume, by careful volume. I glanced at her, then at the horizon where clouds parted to reveal a thin seam of blue. We'll keep the volume low, I said, but never secret. And for the first time in what felt like seasons, we walked without fearing. The silence between words, because its emptiness was honest, and honesty, whispered or shouted, is the only sound that can't be edited out. Chapter 9. The Heartfelt Plea. I didn't sleep the night after the boathouse confrontation. Every time I shut my eyes, I heard Riley's phrase, steer the narrative, and saw Harper's face when the words landed. Somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m. I accepted that rest would not arrive until I gave voice to everything still unsaid. At first I reached for my phone to text, but the glow of the screen felt too clinical for what needed saying. Instead, I pulled out a fountain pen, clogged from disuse, flushed it, and began a letter the old-fashioned way, on thick watercolor paper that bled each word a hair's breadth, as if committing my thoughts in permanent ink. Harper, if critique is a privilege, then silence has been my tax for spending it poorly. I'm ready to pay in full, through listening, patience, and the courage to stand beside your art instead of in front of it. I miss the person who can hear colors. I realize now she couldn't hear them because my voice was too loud. If you're willing, meet me where we first met. No agenda, no analysis, just two sets of footsteps echoing through the same hall. Avery. I folded the page, slipped it into an envelope, and biked across town before dawn, sliding the note under Harper's studio door with nothing but the hush of sleeping streets as witness. A return to the beginning. 2 days passed with no response. On the third afternoon, my phone chimed. Gallery, Thursday, 4 p.m. H. No emojis, no qualifiers. I counted the hours like a child chalking off squares to summer break. Thursday arrived wrapped in crisp sunlight. I wore the same lapis blue shirt I'd had on the day Harper's painting first stopped me in my tracks. Call it superstition, or maybe penance. At 3:45, I pushed open the brass-framed door of Crescent Gallery. The familiar hush rushed over me. Wood polish, faint citrus cleaner, and the low hum of the HVAC system that always reminded me of distant surf. Harper stood near the far wall, back to me, studying a new installation of minimalist sculptures, raw, steel rings balanced on slivers of glass. The afternoon sun slanted through skylights, gilding her profile and turning the dust motes around her into slow-falling confetti. My throat tightened with a cocktail of nostalgia and dread. She sensed me and turned. No smile yet, but her eyes held neither frost nor fire. Just an openness I hadn't seen in weeks. Thank you for coming, I said, voice softer than intended. I almost didn't, she replied, fingers lacing and unlacing. Then I remembered how echoes work. You can't start one alone. The Plea. We moved to the gallery's side corridor. White walls, tall windows, no spectators. I took one steadying breath and spoke before fear could edit the sincerity out of my words. Harper, I'm sorry, again, for every critique I offered without consent. Every time I mistook proximity for permission. I thought enthusiasm equaled encouragement. I see now how easily love can become noise. She listened, gaze steady. Encouraged, I continued. I can't change what I said, but I can change how I say things going forward. You deserve a listener first, a collaborator second, and a critic, only when you ask. I'm asking for a chance to relearn that order. I offered a small canvas I'd carried under my arm, still wrapped in brown craft paper. She hesitated, then peeled the tape. Inside lay a new digital print, 2 figures rendered in negative space, just outlines of shared silence, standing before an unfinished canvas. No colors, no guidance, only potential and the faint shimmer of metallic graphite dusting the edges. Eyes. Left it blank because only you can decide what fills that space, I said. If you ever want me there, I'll bring extra brushes. If not, the outline still belongs to you. For the first time, a tremor cracked her composure. She brushed a thumb over the empty center as if checking whether the whiteness was truly untouched. Avery, she began, voice rough. I never wanted your silence, just your patience. Sometimes your observations felt like highway signs. I couldn't see scenery, only directions. I nodded, shame warming my cheeks. But, she added, and the word glimmered like wet stone, those signs also kept me from getting lost once or twice. I don't want to rip them all out. I just need the road to belong to me too. Relief pried a shaky laugh from my lungs. Then maybe we post fewer signs, only at crossroads, and spend more time walking the shoulder together? Her lips curved into the ghost of a smile. Sounds exhausting, she teased, but worth the blisters. Negotiating new ground. We spent the next hour wandering the exhibit, not as guide and guest, but as parallel observers. When she stopped before a painting of fragmented skylines, I waited. After a full minute, she whispered, "The negative space feels heavier than the architecture." I answered only, "I see it." Nothing more. She nodded, appreciation flickering in her eyes. At 5:30, the curator dimmed the lights. We stepped into the foyer where gold hour flared through stained glass, bathing us in marbled color. It felt like the universe's own palette knife, blending apology and possibility. I meant what I wrote, I said. If critique is ever useful again, you'll ask. Until then, I'll stockpile silence. She slipped the miniature canvas back into its wrapping, yet left the top flap open. I'm keeping this near my easel, she said. One day I might invite you to add a single line, no more. One line, I echoed, smiling. I can make that count. Parting under pastel skies. Outside, traffic whispered along the boulevard. Pigeons traced slow arcs between lampposts. We lingered by the steps where we'd first compared playlists and paint brands months ago. I'm meeting Riley tomorrow, she said at last. He offered to apologize, properly, no cameras. I don't know what forgiveness looks like yet. Trust takes different tempos, I answered. Find yours. I'll keep time from a distance. She exhaled, a breath that seemed to shake. Loose a week's worth of tension, and extended her hand, palm up. I placed my fingers lightly in hers, careful not to hold too tight. For 3 heartbeats, the gesture bridged everything words hadn't. Then she withdrew, waved a quiet goodbye, and headed toward the metro. Halfway down the block, she turned, raised the thermos she still carried, and mouthed, "Chamomile soon?" I answered with a silent thumbs up. A canvas begins again. Back in my loft that night, I placed the craft paper wrapping Harper had folded, a keepsake for courage, beside my monitor. The loft felt unchanged but lighter, as though someone had opened hidden windows. I sat at the tablet, created a new file, and typed the title layer in pale gray. Dialogue in white space, collaboration, pending approval. Then I closed the file without drawing a single line. Some canvases, I'd finally learned, grow strongest in the waiting. Outside, the city softened into pastel dusk. I brewed chamomile, no sugar, and raised the mug to the quiet. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like soil, dark, patient, and secretly alive, ready for whatever colors Harper and I, separately and maybe eventually together, might choose to plant. Chapter 10. Lessons in Loyalty. I once believed loyalty was a straight line, a faithful thread you tie to someone's wrist and never loosen, no matter how far the two of you wander. But the months since I met Harper, and the storms that followed, taught me the thread is actually elastic. It stretches, tangles, frays, even snaps if pulled too hard, yet it can be knotted back together, leaving a scar that glitters like soldered gold. What follows is the story of those new knots, and the quiet promises we made to keep them strong. Riley's Reckoning. The morning after my gallery plea, Riley asked to meet at the Riverside skate park, neutral ground stripped of nostalgia. Gray half-pipes echoed with wheel clatter and distant music. Riley sat on a graffitied ledge, camera nowhere in sight, hands twisting a single lens cap like a worry coin. He started without preamble. "I traded honesty for influence," he said, voice raw. The worst part? I told myself it was protection. I let him speak uninterrupted. He confessed to nudging curators, feeding Harper half-truths, and wrapping each nudge in praise so it felt like sugar rather than control. By the end, his shoulders sagged, as if every revelation weighed a kilo. I broke the lens I was looking through, he finished. Can friendship survive a smashed filter? I thought of childhood bike races and the water tower initials, of the brilliant ways he once framed light without framing people. Then I quoted something he told me years ago. A cracked lens isn't useless. It just refracts the world differently. Maybe, I said, we learn to use the fracture. He blinked, eyes wet, then managed a shaky nod. We didn't hug. Some distances need time, but we left side by side, silence speaking for us both. The studio in winter December sharpened the city's edges. One afternoon, Harper texted a photo, a snow-dusted rooftop rendered in thick impasto, nothing like her old pastel skylines. Tea? She added. 5 letters, infinite invitation. When I arrived, the loft smelled of cedar shavings. She'd built new canvas stretchers by hand. My blank miniature still hung on the wall, but now a single cobalt line curved across its center, delicate as a violin string. I raised an eyebrow. She shrugged, smiling. Consider it the first note. We brewed jasmine and talked, not about composition or brushwork, only about life. Her aunt's recovery from surgery, my nephew learning to pronounce galaxy, the way snow changes city acoustics. Hours later, she pulled out a second canvas, the silhouette piece, now completed. My former rain-soaked figure stood taller, umbrella closed, lamplight replaced by dawn. Beside me she'd painted her own outline, half-transparent, colors from both palettes swirling where we overlapped. I kept your posture, she said, but gave you my sunrise. I swallowed a lump of gratitude. And you gave yourself my umbrella. Shared weather, she answered. Better than shared silence. We agreed on a new rule. Feedback must be requested, never assumed. We sealed it with a pinky promise, and laughter that melted a layer of frost none of us had noticed accumulating. Opening night at February brought Harper's solo show, Thresholds of Quiet, hosted by the same gallery where our story began. Riley volunteered to handle promo posters. He triple-checked every tagline with Harper first, then sent the proofs to me and the curator for transparent review. Trust, restitched, held. Opening night, the gallery lights glowed warmer than I remembered. Strangers drifted from canvas to canvas, murmuring about texture and negative space. I lingered near the doorway until Harper spotted me. She wore a navy jumpsuit speckled with metallic paint, accidental sequins, and greeted me with a hug equal parts excitement and nerves. One corner of the room displayed our collaborative diptych, her storm canvas opposite my neon alleyway, a narrow mirror mounted between them to fuse reflections. A plaque read, "Storm and Glow, A conversation about overlap, distance, and meeting in the middle. People took selfies there, unaware of the scars under the gold leaf framing the works. Scarred, but stronger. Halfway through the evening, Riley arrived with a stack of zines titled Breath Marks, featuring candid Polaroids and handwritten quotes from Harper about creative autonomy. He handed me a copy. On the back, he'd printed a dedication. For those who learn that loyalty is listening, and listening is light. I signed it with a thick marker, an impromptu co-author credit he'd left blank for me on purpose. The gesture felt like a knot pulled tight. The unwritten contract. Weeks later, Harper and I sat on the loft floor, surrounded by tea mugs and wood shavings again. A mild spring storm rattled the skylight, but inside, everything felt steady. We should know it won't always stay this balanced, she said, sliding a new blank canvas toward me. Creative lives tilt, I nodded. When it tilts, we check the compass. She uncapped a marker, wrote one sentence on the canvas's back stretcher. Ask before you guide. Then she handed me the marker. I added the second line. Listen. Before you steer. We signed our names beneath and dated it. Not as a piece for sale, but as an unwritten contract we could hang in plain sight whenever the studio's air thickened with unspoken assumptions. Loyalty notarized in ink. What tomorrow holds. Lately, people ask how the three of us navigate collaboration now. The answer is more slowly, more softly, and with a willingness to press pause. Riley's photos feature longer captions about process, every quote cleared by the subject. Harper's new lamppost series glows with embedded LED strips. Light you must stand still to notice. My own digital pieces bear wider margins, literal breathing room around fluorescent lines. I've learned that loyalty isn't a blindfold you tie on and hope for the best. It's a lantern you carry high. Sometimes it throws harsh shadows, but it keeps everyone visible. And if a friend begins to fade into those shadows, loyalty means raising the lantern higher, not handing it off so someone else controls the light. It also means accepting that boundaries aren't walls. They're doorways with welcome mats that read, "Enter by knock, not by push." We've all walked through those doorways enough times now to recognize the creak of hinges and the echo of respectful footsteps. Closing frame. If you wander into Crescent Gallery these days, you might find a small installation in the annex room. 3 stools arranged in a triangle. On one sits a cracked camera lens sealed with golden resin. On another, a paintbrush dipped in dried ultramarine. On the third, a tablet screen cycling through a single line of text. Art begins when loyalty learns to breathe. There's no plaque explaining who placed them there. We didn't need one. The story belongs to anyone who understands that creativity, like friendship, survives by exhaling ego and inhaling empathy, again and again, brush stroke by shutter, click by pixel. So here I stand, narrator of a tale that started with a spark, in a gallery and nearly burned out in whispered doubt, only to reignite in the steady glow of shared lessons. I don't know what our next chapter holds, whose colors will bleed into whose or which critiques will be welcomed with a nod. But I do know the essential premise. Loyalty is not the absence of conflict. It is the art of sustaining respect through every revision. And if we remember that, tomorrow's canvas will always hold space for the lines we choose to draw. Together, apart, and back together again, as many times as trust requires. Great work today! Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.